my name's Sina Bowyer, and I'm joined today by Jo Cullen, who is an educationalist, lecturer, teacher. And Jo, I'm going to pass over to you and let you tell us about yourself and your input with education and your insights.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sina. So I've been a teacher and lecturer for about 30 years altogether. I'm also working in psychology. I'm doing an MSc in the psychology and neuroscience of mental health. I have taught pretty much every age group from 6-year-olds through to postgrad, teaching doctors most recently. What I think I've learned about education, obviously many things, is I think at the heart of it is the importance of safety, interaction, support within education, and the fact that, looking at sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for those who know that, effective education can only take place when children's physiological and psychological needs are being met, and I think that's really the problem at the moment.
Okay, and for those that don't know how schools are working at the moment, what are your insights there? What is your experience with working with schools and young people in education?
Yeah, so one of the biggest differences, I think, obviously there's the mask wearing in public spaces. A great deal of schools now have redesigned their classrooms so that all children are facing forward. They're siloed. The desks are separated. Teachers not mingling. You know, teachers often at the front of the room, sometimes even behind a screen, not mingling, not able to support, not able to assess progress within the school. Obviously, there's the ongoing disruption. So there's the 4 months lost over the summer, spring and summer, and obviously now the children are back. You know, very many children. I can think of every single secondary school and 2 primary schools in the area where I live have been sending children home for 2 weeks. Different cohorts, different groups at different times. So children don't have that sense of security or continuity of education. At any point, they could be sent home for 2 weeks and then come back again, which is obviously, you know, highly destabilizing and very much upsets their educational experience.
Yeah, and I presumably can also happen very often because it could be one child in their year group, couldn't it? Not even in their direct bubble, and they'll be sent home. So one can only imagine that could happen a lot more as winter builds as well.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, the teachers are exhausted. They've got so much to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, I think that I think there's been generally an assumption that, you know, that they're back at school and all is okay. The media really aren't talking much about this. I saw an article in the Telegraph, I think it was, yesterday, about which stated that 6 out of 10 children at the moment are not getting an effective education for the reasons that we've talked about. So that's 60% of all children are not currently having their educational needs met. And of course, alongside educational needs, you know, there's the psychological and emotional and social development, which is hugely being impeded at the same time, which is a huge concern. Yeah.
And we had a discussion as well, because I was looking at some images and I sent a couple your way, perhaps we'll put them in, about the grooming of children and young people, in a sense, through this advertising of wearing masks. And one of them is a little girl holding a teddy. They're both wearing masks. And I find that quite alarming to look at, because I think it's training children from a very young age to feel that they are diseased, to feel that they are unsafe. And there's something about putting this in proportion, isn't it, in terms of the number of people that coronavirus has actually realistically affected, and that this is our entire population of young people and children that have been impacted in this way.
There are very overt messages being put out in schools. So one thing I saw recently was a child's homework where they were given a picture of, on the top of the picture were two children distanced from each other, turned away with a big tick next to it, and below were two children hugging with a big cross next to it. And the children in this class were asked to write a piece of English writing on what this meant and why this was a good thing, which is, you know, hugely damaging to tell children that actual physical contact, hugging your friends, supporting your friends, is bad and is to be stopped. And this of course, you know, when children are, you know, open to suggestion, when they're developing, when their minds are very open, you know, these messages ram home, you know, and are going to be very difficult to unpick later. Obviously, there are the health concerns of masks. You know, there's no way that children of any age through to, you know, 16, 18 are going to keep these things immaculately clean the whole time. So they're going to be full of bacteria, etc., etc. Severely impacting their physical health. I think that we have to remember that when children have seen masks in the past, they're always associated with sort of evil people in cartoons. You know, they've always been a very, very negative image. And any child, you know, in a public space at school where they are supposed to still interact, chat, play with each other, you know, they cannot do so effectively. They cannot communicate, they cannot interact effectively behind a mask. You know, we know that at least 55% of human communication is nonverbal. We use our body language, we use our eyes, we use our mouths to smile, and of course all this is being completely taken away, so that children are not gaining that emotional development when they're behind masks. And of course masks in themselves are a barrier, and therefore children are constantly being told there is a barrier between you and everybody else, which is exactly not what schools should be fostering.
I think it's a really interesting point as well that you raise about, well, it's not only development, but perhaps that those of us that are used to being able to communicate effectively, maybe we have some resources that young children early on in development don't have, in the sense that we've got a memory of being able to communicate well, and in that sense children are very vulnerable because they haven't embedded those skills as strongly.
Yeah.
So they're more likely to feel afraid and cut off. But I mean, I believe it's affecting people who are quite healthily well adjusted in terms of their social skills and interaction as well, that they also seem very subdued at times. I'm fortunate enough that I'm medically exempt, so I don't have to wear a mask. So quite early on, I disbanded with it. I'm going to fly soon, so I'll probably have to wear one then, but in general not. So that's an area that I wanted to get into, because I was fortunate enough to come into contact, well, firstly with you, because you posted something about universities. So that's the older age group, and there's been the shutdown in universities as well, the restrictions, hasn't there? I don't know how extensive that is. And we had this whole discussion coming out of that, because I just heard something on LBC about universities being an incubus of plagues, and I was pretty appalled by that terminology and the way that this rhetoric is being used more and more, so that people feel that they're sick and diseased and contaminated, likely to pass something on, as almost as if it's a natural state, which is still for me something very new. And I wonder how much people are just assimilating that constantly if they're watching the news every day and not turning to alternative sources of information. And from there, so I joined a psychologist sort of think tank and task group, which I mean, I've studied hypnotherapy and I'm a life coach and studied psychology all my life, but I'm not technically a psychologist. So I'm very pleased to be invited to that group and to bring in something different. And I do see it as a form of mass hypnosis. And I think others in the group feel the same way. And the question is, well, how do we move forward from here to support people?
Yeah. I think, yeah, I think, can I just sort of say a couple of things? So when you touched on university students, that brings to bear particularly the whole area of, online learning only. So what has happened is that young people at a time, again, where they're developing, they're becoming young adults, and it's quite scary to go to university, and they're being, in many cases, told to stay in their hall of residence, and in very, very many cases, all learning is online. So they're very isolated. They haven't got their families for support, and I've done quite a lot of research in this area, in that, online learning, because it doesn't have the social component, nor does it have the instant feedback, which is very important in learning, is actually, it's being accepted as an acceptable way of teaching and learning, but it really isn't. What we'll be finding is that those children and young people who've been learning primarily online will not have had anything like the amount of deep learning, of real learning, that those who've had, a normal education have had. So so your question was how do we, what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah. What are our next steps? Because I think a number of us who've worked in education, and I also do special needs assessments, so I've got assessments coming in at the moment that I'm doing for children and young people that have had, as you're describing, very limited education, so out of school, and they have special needs. I mean, deaf children, for example, and young people in general, are limited in their ability to communicate. Autistic children, even more restricted in their facilities in being able to learn. So,
and of course, autistic children absolutely need routine, continuity, and safety, which have all been taken away. So, I mean, I'm baffled by the number of teachers who are happy to accept all the things that we've been talking about, because they must, well, they have, like me, learned about what children need to learn, and this just isn't happening. And it concerns me hugely that large numbers of teachers are accepting. And I think that, one thing we have to do is we have to try and persuade teachers that this is not how children learn. This simply cannot continue like this. Otherwise, we're going to have this whole, huge cohort of 5 to 21-year-olds, who've got both massive holes in their education, but also, significant impairment to their emotional development at the same time.
And it's certainly my hope that through the group that we are a part of, that we can continue to communicate out a message. I mean, there's been discussions about open letters, haven't there, appealing to head teachers, liaising with GPs, and bringing these various skill areas together. GPs and lawyers are already collaborating, building up a case of evidence. And I think there's a need for the psychologists to do the same. So I would like to be a part of convening a panel of some of the top psychologists, mental health practitioners, life coaches in the UK to give a statement about this. Whether that's simply a panel statement or it's a discussion, a combination of both, and to do this, to keep doing this in a number of ways and keep building up the information and the strategies to move forward.
Definitely, yeah.